behind you in the next 6 months to give you a focus of how you'll fix this economy. It's a reality. I am a Kenyan. Mr. Speaker, Kibaki left, in fact, by June 2013, President Kibaki left at 2.1 trillion. The first term of President Uhuru, he borrowed close to 2.7 trillion. That is visible. We built many roads, including my own constituency, Garissa Modogash, 140 kilometers. We improved the infrastructure of the Kenya Port Authority, the Kenya Airport Authority. We invested in geothermal and energy. Mr. Speaker, finally, this 8.3, the minister is not telling us how much commitments, 3.7 trillion commitment loans, Honorable Munyasi will tell you, which we are paying for. Speaker, we are at 11.7, and the minister did not come to this house for approval. And we are saying, Ukur Yatani, not today. After this government leaves, you will.
Honorable Dwale, it is good that that last comment is not on record. No, it is not on record, and the speaker did not hear it. But it just leaves me wondering. I mean, why is everybody fighting to take over this poison chalice? I will give the next chance to the Honorable Nyenze Edith, member for Kitui West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity to contribute to this bill. Actually, I note that the main objective of the Public Debt Management Authority Bill 2020 is to establish the Public Debt Management Authority as an independent body to manage the public debt in the country at both levels of government, that is the national government level and also the county level. The country's debt is actually rising at an alarming level, and therefore there is need to manage the same, to protect the current and future generations. And that's why this authority is being created, to try to manage, to try to control, to try to administer the public debt. Debt is not bad, because everyone, for there to be growth, then one has to take some loan and therefore incur some debts. But now the question is how to manage that debt. So the debt level in our country is quite alarming, as I've said, and that is 70% of GDP. And the question is, how is this debt being used? It's good to have a register whereby we would have a record showing after we borrow this amount of money, where does it go? Because where it's being used should be up in projects which will give back to the country, and actually which won't be used to even repay this debt. Because if we just take loans and then without having proper use of them, of the funds, then we are likely to misuse that money through other ways, through corruption, through mismanagement, misappropriation, and therefore when it comes to repayment, it becomes a problem. So it's good to know where the money, have a register where the money will be used, and that will be the work of this authority. And the other thing is that actually we incur debts when the ratio between revenue and expenditure does not balance. When the expenditure is so high, then we incur debts. Central Bank has been in charge of managing our debt, though we have in Treasury a department which deals with debts. But up to now, there is need to have an authority which will be independent, which its core mandate will be to manage, to control the debts. If this authority is not given independence, then we'll be doing, we'll just be creating it in impunity. It will not do the work which if it's not given independence. It should also be given enough funding to ensure that it carries out its work appropriately. And this is to try to reduce wastage through their management, to try to reduce corruption, to try to ensure that the country only borrows what it can pay back. So, Mr. Speaker, I actually support the authority to be put in place to ensure that there is a proper management of our public debt. But the country should also look at other expenses, especially which go to some parastatals, which are always funded, and they do not seem to give back to the community, to do the service they are meant to be doing. So it's good for the country to ensure that enterprises which are depending on the exchequer for survival and are not productive, we should actually do away with them. And also that government should live within its means. Because if it lives within its means, then that means we will not have many debts. We will control the debts. So we should only borrow if we have a proper plan on how to repay the debts. And we should also enhance revenue collection so that the ratio between revenue and expenditure is actually reduced. Although I congratulate KRA because they are doing very well in revenue collection, which I hope is not killing the new startups and the small businesses. But I congratulate them since this time their revenue collection is very good. So we should actually keep on enhancing the revenue collection to ensure that the balance between revenue and expenditure is reduced, and this will mean not taking too much loans. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support the creation of the new authority. Thank you.
Very well. The Honorable Jungle, member for Thika Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the creation of this authority, and I think there are three things that we need actually to look into this country. And just like any other enterprise, if you do not run a country like an enterprise, then you are doomed to fail. If we don't plan ourselves so that we can be able to run in a way where we are creating money for our country. And there are only 2 or 3 things I really want to say. If you're taking a debt, you must plan for it. You cannot take debt so that you can use it in consumer goods, in importations. If you take debt, part of that debt must be planned for development. If debt does not produce, it means then you cannot be able to pay for that debt. Number 2, when you plan for the debt, you must make sure that leakages are minimal. By leakages, I mean we have seen a lot of impunity in this country. We have seen a lot of stealing of public funds in this country. We have seen a lot of people, a lot of leaders who get into these seats. They don't get here so that they can build the country. They get here so that they can start milking the country. This, as a country, I think it's high time we decide where do we want to be? What kind of a country do we want to have? What kind of an economy do we want to have? And I can tell you what, if we can be able to address only the issue of corruption, this country will be different in a very, very short time. And I can tell you, even today, if you have seen now, the campaigns and the politics at the highest gear, the heat is on. But I've been looking at the parties that really want to take the executive power in this country. None of those parties or coalitions are anywhere saying zero tolerance to corruption. Nowhere anyone says that they're going to protect public funding. So basically, I find it very odd that everybody is going out there saying how they're going to develop this country. How do you develop the country if you do not address the issue of corruption? It is a mirage. It's not going to happen. Now, let me put it this way, and let me say also that the fact that we want to have an authority that oversees the public debt, I see it as a very positive step. Look at a situation where you have a dominant party taking the executive power in this country. Like what is happening in this parliament today. We have parties or coalitions of parties that have got majority power or majority members in this country. So whenever the government, the executive wants to borrow, they just need to whip their members. And the member has no leeway even of any argument. That is why you see debt ceiling is raised arbitrarily. There are no figures. There is no enough information. But nobody, especially people who belong to those dominant parties, they cannot ask questions why they have been whipped. And if they move the wrong way, of course, there are consequences in the party. But the authority is not aligned to any party. So I really welcome this authority because they can be able to make independent decisions. They can be able to ask questions. We can be able to call them in this August House to answer our questions when we have some. So I think this is totally the right direction that we are moving to. And finally, I want to say that when you take debt and you use it in the correct manner, you are likely to go very far. In fact, private companies that are doing very well, they are into a lot of debt, but because of the debt management, they go far. I want to say that, yes, we cannot get away from public debt. We are going to incur public debt. But the most important part is, can we use that public debt efficiently in a way that it works? I also want to encourage the current government that please, you have a lot of projects out there that are not finished. Finish them up so that whichever advantage that we wanted to get, especially the road infrastructure, those roads will only start bringing money when they are finished and completed. Please make sure that all those roads are completed. And even in this one, I want to put one particularly in my constituency, that is in Thika East, a place called Muguga. It goes all the way to Githima. That road has a lot of benefits to the people of Thika. I ask the current government and the relevant ministry, please put money in that road. Let it get finished. We need to start using it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well spoken, the Honorable Jungle. I wish you well in your pursuits in the greater Kiambu area. The Honorable Kimani Kuria, member for Molo.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, I would like to congratulate the Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi on coming up with this timely bill about debt management. Mr. Speaker, I would like to quote President Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States, who said, "Blessed are the young, for they shall inherit the national debt." That is the sad reality that you're talking about now. That every person born now and in the future inherits a debt that's the responsibility to pay. But many people will ask then, how then do we do development if you're not borrowing? Ronald Reagan, the 40th president of the US, said that we do not have $1 trillion debt because we haven't taxed enough. But you have $1 million debt because we spent too much. And the biggest question the biggest problem and the only solution we have as a country is to manage our expenditure. Because as long as we continue to make roadside declarations on projects that are going to be done without due diligence on what is the cost, what is the value, and what is the return from that project, we will continue to have this problem, Mr. Speaker. In economic term, we call it a physical discipline. Mr. Speaker, according to the Constitution, we have had most members of the executive resign from their offices ahead of them going to seek political office. We have seen several cabinet secretaries, we have seen several principal secretaries and heads of parastatal resign. And Mr. Speaker, I'm almost certain that's going to take a few months before those positions are filled. What does that mean? Does it mean that with the resignation of the Minister for Agriculture, Cicely Kariuki, now there is no programs that are happening at the Ministry of Agriculture? Does it mean with the resignation of the Principal Secretary for Water, for him to go and vie for a political seat, then there are no operations in that particular state department? The answer is no. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, some of the current expenditures we have by the executive are actually not necessary. We have the appointment of CASs, Cabinet Administrative Secretaries. Of course, it comes with a lot of staffing, a lot of budget for those offices. Those offices are not even legal in the Constitution, and therefore they did not even exist before. So what these roles that they do, these expenses that they incur, can those expenses be avoided? And therefore, Mr. Speaker, that's why I'm saying that the solution to our debt problem is actually physical discipline. We must be disciplined in how we spend Wanjiko's money, in how we spend our taxpayers' money. The Honorable Jango has done a very good contribution about the role of our political parties. When you listen to the debate, now you can tell which political inclination someone stands on how they support or oppose the issue of debt, on whether they approve the government to borrow more or not. And we saw this scenario change when the political inclination was different 1 or 2 years ago. As a parliament, as bestowed to us by Article 211 of the Constitution, about our role in debt management, we should take a responsibility as parliament and actually have a bipartisan approach to this matter. We should forget whether we are Kenya Kwanza or Azimio and tackle this issue of debt as Parliament of the Republic of Kenya, and not because of our political inclination. Because, Mr. Speaker, the decisions that we make for our people is this debt that we are accumulating for our children. It will be paid for all our children, irrespective of whether they are Kenya Kwanza or Azimio Kwanza children, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, I raised on the floor of this House as per our standing orders to seek a statement from the Departmental Committee on Agriculture about fertilizer prices. And, Mr. Speaker, such a priority area when Kenyans are tired about food prices, that question, Mr. Speaker, has not been prioritized even now. I have not received an answer from the Departmental Committee on Agriculture on the solution towards these fertilizer prices. And yet, at the end of the year, we'll cry again that the food prices have gone up. But like in my constituencies, this is a planting season. So if the Ministry of Agriculture has to provide a solution on the fertilizer prices, it has to be now when you are planting. Because if you lower these fertilizer prices in August or in September, then it's not going to be helpful to us. Because by that time it will be too late. We will not have been able to plant enough to feed this country. Mr. Speaker, some of my constituents are feeding their cows with cabbages and sukuma wiki. Carrots are being eaten by cows and goats from Molo because we are great farmers. And my farmers cannot understand the issue about food prices because they are growing the food. But the cost of growing this food is too high because especially of the cost of this fertilizer. And if you're going to address this issue, we must look at the issue of these farm inputs, Mr. Speaker. Politicians have spoken about the issue of debt. And they have spoken depending on their political inclination. But, Mr. Speaker, I choose to take a slightly different approach. We have an institution called KIPRA in this country, an institution that is funded by government funds to do research on matters of public and on matters of public policy. And their report last year, they said that although our debt is sustainability is wanting, they pointed out at the key indicators about our debt sustainability that needs to be looked into. Mr. Speaker, the solvency indicators such as the present value of public debt as a percentage of GDP should be at 70%. Mr. Speaker, the present value of external debt as a percentage of our GDP should be at 55%. And as we speak, as the current debt sustainability or these two ratios that measure debt sustainability are way below the threshold. So forget the politicians, Mr. Speaker. Our policy makers are saying this debt sustainability is wanting, that we really need to look at the issue of this debt and look at these indicators and provide a solution. So when I hear some of leadership of this house saying we need to raise the debt ceiling, we need to raise the debt ceiling, are they talking as politicians or are they listening to policy makers in this country? Because that's what they are saying. So as I submit, Mr. Speaker, my request to this August House, this 12th Parliament, is please let us look at this issue of debt in a bipartisan manner. Let us forget which political inclination we follow, and let us make a decision that is good for our great country of Kenya. Let us manage this debt. Let us reduce our debt. Let us reduce our spending, because the only solution to this debt issue, Mr. Speaker, is fiscal discipline. And with that, I submit.
Thank you, Kimani Kuria. Well spoken. The Honorable Tandaza Sawa, member for Matuga.
Kwanza shukrani nyingi kwa Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia fursa hii niweze kuzungumza juu ya jambo hili muhimu sana ambalo linamuuma mwananchi katika pembe ya jamhuri hii yetu ya Kenya. Nichukue fursa hii pia kumshukuru Mheshimiwa Sakwa Bunyasi ambaye ni mtaalamu wa mambo haya ya madeni na mwanachama wetu wa ANC kuweza kufikiria kwa kitaalamu kuona kwamba umefika wakati ambapo bila watu kama yeye kuweza kuleta miswada kama hii, basi Kenya itaangamia. Na itaangamia kwa sababu tunachukua madeni leo ambayo huenda sio sisi ambao tutalipa madeni haya. Ni madeni ambayo yatalipwa baada ya miaka 20, 30, 10, wengine hatutakuwepo. Inamaanisha basi wale ambao watalipa madeni haya ni vizazi vinavyokuja, ambavyo vizazi hivi tayari vina changamoto ya ajira, ina changamoto ya kwamba hawana pesa mfukoni, wana changamoto za kila aina, ili hali ndio tunatarajia waweze kulipa madeni haya. Na ndio maana mswada huu ni wa muhimu kuweka kiwango maalum kwamba licha ya vile ambavyo atakayekuwa kiongozi atataka kula pesa hizi, kwa sababu ukiangalia pesa nyingi ambazo zimechukuliwa katika madeni, fungu kubwa ni ile ambayo limeingia kwa mifuko ya watu. Huo ndio ukweli. Kwa hivyo licha ya kuwa kiongozi atakayekuwapo na aliyepo atakuwa labda na hamu na yeye kuona ni vipi anaweza kuongeza mapato yake ama mapato ya wachache kibinafsi, itakuwa anajua moja kwa moja kwamba hawezi kuenda zaidi ya kiwango fulani. Na hiki kiwango, hata kile ambacho tunatarajia kuweka, kwa maono yangu binafsi, ni kwamba tayari hakinufaishi na hakitawezekana. Nilikuwa nikifanya hesabu tu ya haraka haraka kuona kwamba kwa mfano kama tulikuwa na deni ya trilioni 1 mwaka wa 2018, hata bila kuomba fedha zingine, kwa sababu ya kuwa sisi tunaomba kwa pesa ya kigeni ambayo ni dola na pesa zingine, na tunatarajia kulipa deni hili kwa pesa hizo hizo, na ili hali uchumi wetu tunategemea zile rasilimali ambazo sio za lazima kwa wale tunaowauzia kwa pesa za kigeni. Kwa mfano, utakuta saa hizi bidhaa ambayo inatuletea hela nyingi zaidi ilikuwa ni maua. Maua haya tunayapeleka nchi za ugaibuni. Lakini ujue yule anayenunua maua si lazima anunue maua. Hili ni jambo la kustarehesha. Kwa hivyo wakati wowote akisema wacha nifanye mambo mengine, inamaanisha moja kwa moja hela hii ambayo tulikuwa tunaitarajia hatutaipata. Lakini vile vitu ambavyo sisi tunaagiza kutoka nchi za nje ni vitu vya muhimu. Tunaagiza madawa, tunaagiza mafuta ambayo tunahitaji katika uzalishaji, tunaagiza malighafi. Kwa hivyo sisi tunalazimika kuagiza vitu kwa bei ile ambao wao wanataka, ili hali vitu ambavyo sisi vingeweza kutupatia hela hizi kwao si lazima. Kwa hivyo wakati wowote utakuta kwamba hata tusipoomba pesa zaidi, lakini kwa sababu thamani ya dola inaendelea kupanda, basi moja kwa moja ule ceiling ambao tutakuwa tumeweka, ule mkakati ambao tutakuwa tumeweka kwamba hatuwezi kuzidi hapa, ni lazima tujue kwamba itazidi, kwa sababu deni linalumbikizika, kwa sababu ya kuwa zile pesa ambao tumeomba nazo za kigeni zinaendelea kupanda na shilingi yetu inazidi kurudi chini. Kuna njia mojawapo ambayo ingetusaidia kwa wale ambao watakuwa nahusika na mambo ya uchumi. Iwapo tungeweza kuimarisha uzalishaji wa vile vitu ambao na sisi tungeweza kupeleka nje. Na kwa bahati mbaya, ijapokuwa tunasema kwamba nchi yetu ni ya ukulima, hata chakula chenyewe saa hizi hatuna cha kutosha. Inamaanisha kile ambacho tunajivunia nacho kwamba uti wa mgongo wa nchi hii ni ukulima, hata chakula chenyewe hatuna. Kwa hivyo mbali na kuleta kutoka nchi za nje vile vitu ambavyo sivyo vya lazima kama chakula, bado inabidi tuweze baadaye kuchukua vitu kama hivi ambavyo tungeweza kuzalisha, na ili hali tungeweza kuzalisha ingeweza kuweka ile thamani ya shilingi yetu kidogo, ikawa inaweza kuwa na kiwango ambacho itapunguza deni ambalo liko nchi za nje. But la muhimu zaidi ambalo linanihuzunisha kwa upande wangu, nikija upande wa pwani kwanza kwa ujumla, tumezungumzia deni kubwa la SGR. Nafikiri hili ndio deni moja kubwa ambalo lilikuja kwa mpigo. Na tukiangalia deni hili, ijapokuwa sisi kutoka pwani na tumezungumzia swala hili, hatujakataa SGR, lakini ilichukuliwa deni SGR kumuumiza yule mtu ambaye anatarajiwa kulipa deni hili. Ukiangalia uchumi wa pwani kwa wakati huu na athari ambazo zimeletwa na SGR, zile biashara ambazo zilikuwako katika upande wa wana biashara wa clearing and forwarding, kutoka upande wa wale waliokuwa na magari ya kubeba ile mizigo, kutoka upande wa wale waliokuwa wana biashara za kuuza malighafi, yani spare parts, utakuta biashara hizo zimekufa. Na ni biashara ambazo zilikuwa zinawasaidia yule mkazi wa pwani, ilikuwa zimeajiri watu wengi sana. Sasa limechukuliwa, biashara hizo zinaumiza, hazipo, watu wamerudi manyumbani, hawana ajira, na ule mradi ambao umefanywa unatarajiwa pia mtu wa pwani yule aweze kulipa deni hilo. Pengine itafika wakati ambao tutaonelea, na naona ni vizuri kwamba wakati deni limechukuliwa na linawafaidi watu wengine na wengine hawafaidi kwa deni hilo, basi wale ambao wanafaidika waweze kulipa deni hilo, na wale ambao liliwaumiza deni hilo basi waweze kusamehewa, manake kwanza ndio wameathirika kupitia kuchukua kwa deni hilo. Madeni ambao tumeweza kuchukua, Mheshimiwa Spika, tumesema ni upande wa mabarabara. Mimi katika eneo langu la ubunge, Mheshimiwa Spika, kutoka Dunia Ianze tuna kilomita 16 peke yake za barabara ya lami. Na ili hali tumechukua madeni kwa sababu ya barabara. Kuna wakati ambao ilikuwa imewekwa kwamba kila mwaka kutafanywa kilomita 10,000 za lami, lakini kwa upande wetu sisi watu wa Matuga kutoka Dunia Ianze, na hii kilomita 16 sio ya hivi majuzi, ni kilomita 16 ambazo zilijengwa mwaka wa 85. Kwa hivyo madeni haya ambayo yanachukuliwa yanafaidi wengine sehemu zingine, kuna watu maalum ambao wanajua deni hili likija litawafaidi wao. Lakini kwa upande wetu sisi watu wa Matuga, ikiwa ni barabara, hatujafaidi. Lakini la kusuhudisha ni kwamba bado tutahitajika kulipa madeni haya, na ndio maana nikasema labda itafika wakati kwamba wale ambao madeni yakichukuliwa, wakifaidi kwa hayo, basi walipe wao. Sio kwamba wengine wale sisi tuishie kuna wa mikono kisha na sisi tuambiwe pia nyinyi ondokeni, karamu imeisha. Nafikiri hapa kuna tatizo kubwa sana. Na kuomba deni, unaomba na uganga wa deni ni kulipa. Wakati tunaomba, tumetarajia tulipe na nini? Nafikiri hili ndilo swala ambalo kwa hali yoyote litamdhuru kila mwananchi, hata yule ambaye amenufaika na mikopo hii na madeni haya. Ukweli ni kwamba itafika wakati pia yeye atalilia kwenye kivo, kwa sababu vile ambavyo tumeomba mpaka sasa na uchumi wetu vile ambavyo ulivyo, kwamba mashirika yanafungwa, hakuna namna ya watu kupata ajira, moja kwa moja ni kwamba hatutaweza kulipa madeni haya. Na imelifikia wakati kwa kuna tetesi kwamba kuna mashirika maalum ambayo yalitumiwa kuhakikisha kwamba hii mikopo inapatikana. Na ikiwa mashirika haya basi yataweza kuchukuliwa, itakuwa ni fedheha kwetu, itakuwa ni aibu, tutaweza kuumia na bado tutakuwa tunadaiwa. Kwa hivyo la kumalizia ni kwamba wakati tunachukua deni, tuweze kuchukua deni tukijua tutalipa kupitia wapi. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika, na naunga mkono mswada huu wa kuhakikisha kwamba kuna shirika maalum la kuangalia masuala ya madeni.
The Honorable Okello Odoyo, member for Nyando.
Honorable Speaker, I thank you very much for granting me this opportunity, and on the same breath share my approval to this bill by Honorable Bunyasi. And I want to congratulate him for coming up with this. And this discussion, Honorable Speaker, could not have come at a better time. As we approach our elections, recently this has been one of the major discussion points by various political parties and presidential candidates and their ilk. And debts indeed have brought us down as a nation. The only hypocrisy and the epitome of it all, which has been exhibited by people who have put us into this ditch, and how I wish that they understand that this debt thing that now has become part of their campaign manifesto emanate from their own misgivings. And we hope that going forward, more realities will be coming out, and whoever has to be blamed, that will be apportioned at his doorstep. Honorable Speaker, there is nothing wrong with taking a debt. I remember when we joined this house, some of us had been living in the villages for way too long. And when we came here, the only recourse was to apply for mortgage so that we could have a place to stay within Nairobi. Of course, a mortgage has constantly been misunderstood, even by an organization, an authority such as Salaries and Remuneration Commission, thinking that this is a grant expended to members of parliament. Far from it, Honorable Speaker, this is a debt that we have an obligation as members of parliament to service. And in any case you dishonor, there are repercussions which are quite grievous. And therefore, a loan gives anybody an opportunity to expand their economic well-being. And the only disconnect is when these loans are not plugged into projects that change the lifestyles of the Kenyan people. And that is where we are today, Honorable Speaker. I was talking about hypocrisy that is being exhibited by our competitors, and I'm not afraid to say, Honorable Speaker, that a classical example is the Eurobond, which this country got 100 billion shillings, and record has it that that money never got to this country. Probably it is what is now causing all the furor that we see in the nation. people moving in choppers and buying loyalty of various politicians and supporters across the nation, Honorable Speaker. If we are not going to be told unequivocally what happened to Eurobond and many others that have been in place like Anglo leasing, then we are lying to ourselves as a nation when we have to put this as an integral part of our manifestos and policies going forward towards the next elections, Honorable Speaker. Our taxes are not enough, and that is why we have to go to the IMF and other breasthood institutions to cushion ourselves against what may, in essence, become a poverty line for the entire nation. So COVID has also played its fair share in bringing us to where we are today, and the need now to go and borrow money outside there. But this has already been spoken by the previous speakers or the contributors, Honorable Speaker. When a nation is going for commercial loans as opposed to concessionary loans, Honorable Speaker, where you tend to pay within a very shorter period of time, and at the same time, Honorable Speaker, there are higher interest rates, then it does not make sense as a nation. So concessionary loans would always have a longer payment period, up to 20 years, Honorable Speaker. And besides that, the interests that are charged and accruing on those loans tend to be much lesser. So as a nation, this is the direction that we need to take so that we do not overburden the Kenyan taxpayer. Of course, we have been pushed to the limit, Honorable Speaker. A while back, the country was debating about the fuel prices, and we came to the realization that we have reached our elasticity point when it comes to fuel prices. You cannot add anything extra now. And those are the areas where we also derive our taxes that run our economy. And we then as a nation must diversify. And through diversification, you may want to consider agriculture and giving us inputs that are manageable in terms of pricing, fertilizers that are affordable to the farmer, so that we expand our horizon in that field, Honorable Speaker. If one would visit the Arab world, and I want to take Dubai for example, flying between here and Dubai using Emirates or any other airline within the Gulf is so cheap. You wonder why Kenya Airways would want to cash in and make so much money. At the end of the day, they don't get enough clients to fly in their planes, and in any event, those planes are not even beautiful to begin with, Honorable Speaker. Tourism has become our number 2 revenue earner, and that is known by all and sundry. Why can't we make these travels affordable? Why can't we make our hotels much affordable? You'll stay in what would pass for a 5-star hotel in Dubai, for instance. And what you pay here for a 2-star is much more than what you pay for a 5-star hotel in Dubai, Honorable Speaker. Why can't we diversify various fields, including what has made Singapore what it is, the ICT, so that we make more monies, reduce our debt portfolio, and move this nation to the next level? Honorable Speaker, we will be going into our elections in a few months to come. I know this idea of discussing debts in public fora will not last more than a week. People will now be getting into other things. But, Honorable Speaker, how I wish that much attention will be put into this debt thing inside this House. And I'm glad that this is a house of record, a house of figures, where people would want to debate and debate soberly, as opposed to the insults and tantrums that we throw out there in the political field, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we gained from former President Kibaki a debt of 1.8 trillion that has since moved to about 8.2 trillion. give and take another 800 or 600 billion shillings from parastatals, where the government acts as a collateral. So we are still below 9 trillion, which is the ceiling that has been passed by this House. But there is potential danger that if we engage in more borrowing, then we may surpass the ceiling, and that will be unconstitutional. And somebody has to be taken to account over this matter, Honorable Speaker. So I support this Bunyasi bill so that we will be getting to know where money is going to come from. Is it a commercial loan? Is it a concessionary loan? What is it going to do? And what would be the benefits that will be accruing to the Kenyan people? And with that, I thank you for the opportunity, Honorable Speaker.
Linda familia na marafiki dhidi ya magonjwa.
The UHC coverage journey is on. NHIF is working under the guidance of the Ministry of Health in the UHC Step Up, which presents an opportunity to secure Kenyans access to quality health services without suffering financial hardship. So take the bold step today and safeguard your families by enrolling to NHIF to ensure health for all.
Kwa majina mimi naitwa Aquila Sanayela Mako. Ninaishi Namanga. Wakati wa games tukikaa tu hapo na wanafunzi wenzangu tukicheza